And we are live. This is FinLit Live. This is your boy, Darnald Jr., your favorite insurance agent. And this is FinLit Live. This is the show where we get educated about personal finances. And today we're talking about money mindset. So if you feel like you have a poor attitude or poor frame of reference towards money, this is the show to tune into. And I'm super excited about today. You probably noticed the new intro. Super excited for my virtual assistant for helping me put that together. In addition, we are streaming in 1080p. This is the first time in our 2 years being on the air to stream in full HD. So definitely, if you're on YouTube, put it on 1080p. So live and living color. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive in and just get lit. All right, without any further ado, I'd like to bring on our guest, LaTika. Hey, LaTika, how's it going?
Hey, good to see
Thank
you
you for
today,
taking time out.
Darnell.
Your Good to see you also, Baylor Bear, right? Sickle
Oh
Bears.
yes.
I appreciate you for taking time out your busy schedule. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? And what are you up to?
Yeah, sure. So, hey, everybody. As he mentioned, my name is LaTika Tillis. I am a native Houstonian and a Baylor Bear. So, I'm really happy here to represent Houston and also the Baylor Bears. But I have been in the financial planning slash wealth management industry for over 16 years in a myriad of different roles. And now I am focused on educating the masses, presenting financial education, financial literacy to those that may not have had access to traditional financial advisors. It's still necessary and needed information. So, through my company, Practical Money Management LLC, I have been able to do that. And I'm very happy to continue that journey here with Darnell today.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about your story. Like, how do you get into the financial industry? Like, what inspired you? What keeps motivating you to keep going forward? Like, what is your story?
Yeah. So, where do I start? I think it's a common story. I always like to start with college. And my senior year, I had an elective. It was personal finance. And it was one of those, I need an elective. I got to get these credits and I got to get out of here. So I wasn't necessarily focused on getting the A plus plus in that particular class because it was just one of those things. I'm like, hey, this seems necessary. Well, I got out of that class with a C. I didn't apply myself as much as I could. And I will tell you that the last place I thought I would land as a career is in the finance industry. So just like most of us, we get out of college, we need a job and we need one quickly. And so I did find a kind of an entry level job in a financial planning firm. And as I started to learn more and more about what it all entailed, it just kind of stuck. And it became something I began to utilize for my own family. All of the things that I learned in that personal finance course began to come front and center. And I actually connected with it in a real way. And so, what not only was I learning how to handle high net worth clients and individuals, I was learning how to handle my own family situation. I was learning the importance of life insurance and why an investment portfolio is important and why allocating to your 401k should be a priority and things of this nature. And so, all of the things I did not learn growing up, I began to learn in this new phase of my life as a young adult, as a young professional. And another part of my story I like to reference is people say, well, why do you do this? What's your inspiration? Well, my parents, my mom particularly, and they gave me everything they could mentally, spiritually, physically, monetarily. My mom raised in a single mother household, and she imparted in me, if you don't do anything else, pay your bills. And so that was one thing I always knew. If I'm not going to do anything else, I'm going to be deliberate about paying my bills. And although that was the extent of my financial literacy education, I feel like it gave me an acceptable base to start with. And now that she's nearing retirement, I wish that there was someone like me or someone similar in her life that she could have connected with to then make sure her life on the back end is comfortable and she can make the plans that she wants and live the type of life that she would want to live after she's worked for most of her life because she deserves it. And so people like my mother, they are my inspiration on why this is important, and my children, offspring, those of us that need to learn about this information so that we can have a positive future for our offspring and our lineage.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad you're in the space because it's important and it's much needed. And you're actually saying news to me. I didn't even know Baylor offered a personal finance class.
They Look, I don't know if they still do, but they did when I was there.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. I would have taken it if I would have known it was elective. I
Yeah.
took prop building class for my election.
Yeah.
So, well, without any further ado, we're here to talk about money mindset, and you definitely have some tips on how people can have a better mindset when it comes to money.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
the floor is yours,
Okay. All mine? All mine? No.
all yours.
So, what's important, and here's the thing, there's a scripture. I'm a believer, strong believer in the Lord Jesus Christ. And so there is a passage that says, without a vision, the people perish. So when we're talking about realigning our mindset, the first thing we have to focus on, and the first thing we need to do is we have to give ourselves a vision. What does it look like to have a life that is financially secure, financially stable? I know a lot of times people tend to shoot out and they want to be a millionaire, which is great. If that's a goal, let that be a goal. There's a lot of work to get to that point. But at a minimum, if you're going, whatever that goal is, have a vision for it. And if you have a vision, then the next tip is you can have and create a plan. And so as that vision and that plan come together, then you can begin to take the steps that you need to make sure your financial future or your financial present, whatever it is as secure and as stable as it needs to be. I think it's important too that you understand what it is that's most important to you. When I begin all of my coaching relationships, I always start with your value system. If you can identify in your life in general, doesn't have to be about money. If you can identify the things that you value, the things that are important to you in your life, I think it's easier for you to set that vision. And as you set that vision and make that plan, then those goals begin to come together, and now you can be enriched. So for me, the goal isn't necessarily about being rich. I use the word stability. I use the word security. To me, I feel like when it comes to things lining up, especially in a financial sense, you want to focus not on. I like to use the phrase, and we say this: low lying fruit. What are those things that you can chip away at in your plan, in your life, in your value system that are easier to accomplish, I guess you can say. So that's going on into another tip is making things manageable. I know when it comes to our money, it's overwhelming. It's a conversation that most of us tend to avoid because it's a loaded conversation, right? We've got dynamics, we've got all kinds of things going on in our minds and in our hearts and in our heads. And it seems like money is always there to either tell us what we can or cannot do. But what we can do is control the aspects of our lives when it comes to finances that we can control and be committed to that. Darnold, I'd like to get some of your story if you don't mind. I know you're not on the interview panel, but I like to connect with other people and just understand the different backgrounds so that we can kind of bring those together and talk about the synergies on where you were and how you got where you are today on this journey.
Absolutely. So similar to you, they didn't teach me how money works, and that's the heart and purpose behind this whole podcast is to educate people on that. And so, ironically, I was actually really savvy when it came to finances when I was in college. Like I was
Yeah.
super frugal. Literally, my rent when my last 2.5 years in college was it was like $300 a month, and I was sticker shock when I had to pay $600 a month when I graduated from college. It was incredible. But so my goal was to graduate Baylor debt free,
Mm.
and didn't quite hit that goal. But for $100,000 university, only had $7,000 in loans, and that's it. So started off pretty well, but then it went downhill from there.
And that's part of that mindset. So for one, like you said, you were in college. I feel like you were very deliberate. You were very intentional about what that vision was. The vision was, I want to graduate college without any debt. And although you still had a small amount of debt that you incurred and that you still had to take care of, it was incrementally lower than what a lot of other people have graduated from Baylor with. Case in point.
Absolutely.
And so it still started with a vision. You came in, you said, this is my goal. This is what I want to achieve. And then you set out a plan to be able to do that. You made choices that were in line with that goal, because I'm sure if you want to say a value was part of that security and stability of being debt free or not having a lot of debt when you graduate from college. Because as we talked about before we started the interview or the live, We talked about how once you leave school, it's time, as my dad would always say, to meet the proverbial bear, the real bear, not the Baylor bear, the actual bear, the bear of life.
Absolutely.
And you have all these thoughts and these visions on what you think things will be, and then you have to kind of backtrack. And then, like you said, I wasn't debt free when I graduated, but I was far ahead most of your peers because you did come into the situation with a vision. And although a lot of us on the broadcast today are probably well past our college years, still thinking about what that even looks like for your children, because financial literacy isn't just about what you do for yourself. It's about what you do and what you set up for those that are coming after you and those that are coming behind you. And so one of my visions, one of my goals is for my children to go to college and to matriculate through university without having the burden of debt. And so I take the responsibility as a parent to say, that's my job. So my vision is to say, okay, today my youngest is 2, my oldest is 11, so she's closer to going to school. Is what tools are available? What mindsets do I need? What changes do I need to make that particular vision a reality in our lives and in our children's lives? And so using that as an example, now sometimes I feel like we feel like there's so many buckets that have to be hit, right? We've got to pay our bills, we've got to plan for retirement, then we've got braces for the kids, and then we want to plan for college for the kids, and then we have housing expenses, and we have all these things and all these buckets that we have to fill. And so eventually that cup that we hope doesn't run out, we want it to run over and it'll overflow. You feel like at some point you're just got little drops and little trinkets in each little cup, right? And I want to tell you that's okay. Do whatever it is you can with what you have. And I think for some people that gets a bit daunting. Number one, you do have to employ a level of discipline, a level of commitment, because that's one thing I think that gets ahead of us. Is a lot of us, and I say us, I say this in a general sense, have grown up with a background to where maybe we didn't have as much as we have now. I think a lot of us in this generation might have our probably have more money at our disposal, regardless of inflation, than a lot of our parents did when we were growing up. And so we want to give ourselves the life and we want to give our children the life that we wish we had back then that we didn't have. And sometimes that can tend to the psychology behind money that then affects those values and those visions and things of that nature. And while I'm not saying don't have those visions, don't let that be a guide as somewhat in your life. You have to make sure you meet all of these things with practicality. And that's why, like I said, the LLC for my business is practical money management, because you still have to be practical and make sure that even in your visions, even in your plans, even in your commitment and your discipline, that the low hanging fruit, and I think I referenced that earlier, that the low hanging fruit it's there for you to take so that you feel like you're making progress. And I do want to get a little more practical. So I did talk about number one, have a vision so that you know exactly where you're going. Number two, believe that you can actually, make it happen. Believe that you can do what you set out to do, regardless of how long it takes, regardless of the sacrifices you have to make. You have to just believe in your ability to make things happen. Believe in your ability and have faith that God will partner with you to help you make these things happen as they are found in His will, right? And outside of that, partner with the people and the resources like Darnell, like myself, that can help you fill in those gaps. Because sometimes it's not a matter of what you don't have access to as far as what's in your pocket. A lot of times it's the information you don't have access to, which is where the literacy and the education comes from. There's a lot out there that I learned in my time in the financial planning industry. I'm like, there is some stuff that's out here that's really good, but unless you have hired or have the wealth to be able to sit down and meet with a financial advisor, I would argue to say maybe 80% of the population doesn't even, get to touch some of this stuff. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
And so it's hard to find those people that you can plug into, especially when you're not used to talking about money. Who can I contact to help me get to that next phase in my life? And that's hard. That's not always easy because, again, money is a private thing. It's a taboo thing that people don't normally like to speak a lot about. But you have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Get comfortable with the uncomfortable in this area, you know. And I know it's a lot about trust and what we have and what we don't have, and feeling a level of shame even in some instances. But it's about meeting that goal, having that vision, and then just connecting with whatever resources or whatever people you can to make sure that vision is coming to pass, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So I always love the phrase, people get funny when you talk about money. Do you agree with that statement?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
definitely agree with that.
And to your point, money was definitely taboo in our family growing up. Like we just didn't talk about it. So it's something that it takes vulnerability and humility to be able to open up.
Yeah.
But the reality is, the people at the top, they're open to talk about money. It's incredible how
Mhm.
open they are to talk about money. And so it's a conversation that needs to be had. So there's some people that do have the education, but they're still falling short. And ultimately, where most people fall short is they don't apply the knowledge. Like, how can
Mhm.
people bridge that gap between, okay, I know what to do, but I'm not
Mhm.
actually doing the right thing? Like, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's a hard one because that comes down, like I said, I think that's when you kind of delve into some of the psychology behind money, because or behavioral finance, because behavioral finance is a real thing. It's like you said, it's that disconnect. It addresses that disconnect behind knowing what to do and actually doing it. And so a lot of times, I mean, number one, we're in America, so let's just get real about that. We live in a consumer society. Okay, we want it, we get it, whether we can afford it or not. And so I think as and I reference too, there's actually a young lady that I've been speaking with, and one of her things, and she said it is, I grew up not having much. I grew up poor. I grew up broke. I didn't have much. I'm going to take advantage of this today. You know, and she's right where she needs to be to really begin to create a life for herself that is going to set her up for some time, you know. But she's dealing with that prospect of what I didn't have and what I now feel like I deserve, and I'm going to sacrifice on the back end, probably to her detriment for. And she's not necessarily terrible with money. It's just that mindset. So how do we address those mindsets? And a lot of times is, and I don't, whether you call it financial therapy or whatever you want to call it, it is some soul searching that some people have to do, especially if there's that, like people say, if you knew better you would do better. Obviously that's not always the case, but it is like a getting real with yourself and saying, why is it that my situation is not improving? And sometimes there are things that happen that are outside of your control. And if that's the case, then you know, we can't really make adjustments there. Or maybe, you know, maybe there can be on the outside. But if it's something within your control and within your power, that's when you really have to cancel out the narrative and the voices that you hear around you saying you need to have this and it needs to be like this and it should look like this, as far as like I said, the consumer side of things, and really go back to what I just talked about, your vision and your values. And if the things you are doing, the things you are spending your money on don't line up with those two things at a minimum, then you should start to make different choices. And that's what it boils down to, our choices. And so, again, a lot of it is a personal soul searching, sitting down with yourself and really evaluating, is what I'm saying important to me, really as important? And what work am I willing to do to get it? How committed am I to making sure my vision comes to pass? And and the things that I say important to me, are they really important to me? And that's a conversation that you really do have to sit in the mirror and talk to yourself about and say, am I really in this? And if I'm in this, can I, you know, am I going to commit to this process? And then too, I was thinking too, as I said that, there's a I forgot the point I was going to make. God forgive me, but being disciplined is part of that as well. I think a lot of times we lack the discipline to walk out a plan, because that's why I talked about the low hanging fruit, because if we can knock some of those near term financial goals out, it kind of makes you feel like you're doing something and giving you some traction. So, for example, when someone talks about planning for retirement, okay, That's 20 plus years for most people. So it's hard to connect your mind with saying, you mean to tell me that I can have all of this, but I have to wait 20 years to get it? Like, that's hard for people, right? That's
Yeah.
hard if it's not tied to some very near term goal that they can achieve and hold in their hand tangibly right now. That's tough. And so when people can say, well, what defines me and what defines my life in a car or a home or things like that, or a lavish vacation every year, that makes people feel good. And so I think a lot of times people will spend more money on what makes them feel good and less money on what will actually set them up in the future, just because of the
Hmm.
amount of time it takes and how it makes me feel immediately. So again, that's that behavioral side of things, to where it's like just be honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself. And if you find that maybe you've been fibbing a little bit, you can make adjustments. It's fine. but but at the end of the day, you have to live with yourself. You have to live with yourself in those decisions.
Absolutely. It's biblical. The things I want to do, I don't do, and the things I want to don't
Yeah.
do, I don't want to do, I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
that
it
comes
really
to,
is. It really is hard to address that question. Because a lot of times people want the one, two, three practical steps of everything, and sometimes it doesn't exist. It does, like I said. I know it's very ethereal in a sense, but it really is one of those processes to where you really have to have a conversation with yourself, and just start there when it comes to that particular side of the coin.
absolutely. And so if you are watching and you have questions, definitely type in the chat the questions and we'll bring them on the screen. I do have one more question before we take the questions for the
Yeah.
guests. One of the big issues I find that people have too is limiting beliefs. Can you address the
Mhm.
limiting beliefs? Like somebody might have been raised poor. Like I actually read a study that they followed, you know what mince is. And for those that don't know what mince is, it's like the highest IQ people and they are
Mhm.
literally geniuses. And so they did a study on geniuses from the time they were kids, and they were going to find out to see how successful they were in life. And they made a hypothesis that, okay, if they were geniuses and they were in the lower caste family, then they might not be like uber rich, but they're going to definitely bump out the lower class, maybe in the middle class or upper middle class, etc. Middle class, they would bump up to upper class. Upper class, obviously, go to the next level. And so they followed these kids from the time they were small all the way to adults. And it turns out those that were born in the lower class families, guess what? Even though they were geniuses, they still end up in the lower class. Those that
Mm,
were in the middle class still end up in the middle class, and those
yeah,
that were in the upper class end up in the upper class. And so it doesn't matter how smart or intelligent you are, a lot of it comes down to beliefs. And so
yeah,
address that. Like, how do you overcome that belief that, okay, we are destined to be just like our parents, just like our family?
yeah. Again, this is that inward work. The money is the easy part, to be honest. I mean, I know that sounds weird for me to say that. The money is the easy part. It's the inner work that has to be done. And like I said before, it's like first you have to believe that you have the ability. We talk a lot about representation, especially in the Black community, minority communities. What you see, most people say, what I see, that's what I believe. But faith says something opposite. Faith says, I believe what I cannot see. And so, from that perspective, I believe it's hard to have belief necessarily in your ability and in yourself, I guess, sometimes. And that is where you have to tap into something higher than you. Your mind is limited. God's mind is infinite. With man, it is impossible, but with God, it is possible. And so when you kind of couple that with your vision and your desire to do better, and you really have faith and believe, like, God, if I do the right thing, that you're going to help me through this process. Sometimes, like I said, it has nothing to do with the math and what's on paper. It has everything to do with who you're connected with. And first and foremost, I believe that begins with the Lord Jesus Christ. And secondarily, as I think I mentioned this before, connecting with different people, branching out and not limiting yourself to just this environment. And typically that's what I believe happens is I've only ever seen this done. So I'm only ever going to be as good as my circle or my sphere of influence. There are very few people that tend to rise above that in and of themselves. without a connection to other people that can tend to elevate them past that level. There's this popular saying that says, your network determines your net worth. And I believe that. I believe it does matter who you're connected with in your life and who you allow yourself to open up to, what experiences you open yourself up to. I think a great example of that is investing. I believe investing is probably the single most effective tool when it comes to wealth building. But I never knew anything about investing growing up. Just wasn't anything that was brought up because ultimately I don't think the people that were raising me or that I was around could really speak to it, to no fault of anyone's. It's just the lack of education, which is why we're having this conversation. So if we're looking at the concept of investing, people tend to not do it because number one, I don't want to lose money. I feel like it's gambling. Number two, I don't have enough knowledge. I don't even know where to start, where to go. And number three, it's just daunting. It's just a conversation and a task to where it's just this is just scary. It's just really scary. And so if you can't figure out and be resourceful and connect with the people and even the literature and the YouTube videos now to be able to help crack that open a little bit for you, you're always going to matriculate on the same level. So you have to be open to new experiences that's going to graduate you from being in one caste system for the next. Now, as we know, culturally speaking, there are some places to where it like it's not here in the States, but there are other cultures that, those caste systems are it is deeply embedded in their culture. But if you're in an opportunistic place like where we are here in the States, then really the sky is the limit if you allow yourselves to be open to new opportunities.
Absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and take questions from the audience. We have one from Jessica Kimble. It says, what is your recommendation on how we should connect with people to help us with finances or discuss finances with?
Yeah. So first, just start with the people that are around you and see what connections you have. You go to lunch with a friend. Hey, do you happen to have a financial advisor you're working with? Or just start by asking the question. I don't even think that's a regular course of topic. Hey, how's the weather? By the way, do you have a financial advisor you can recommend me to? Right? Making it just a natural course of business. If you're a little bit more ambitious, we've got what's it called? Eventbrite, different
Mhm.
networking opportunities that are in kind of in the industry. If you're just one of those that are just that likes to actually actively seek this out, you can do more networking and begin to just have the same types of conversations and find out what people do and how they do it and get plugged in that way. They have several organizations out there, as far as finances go, that you can tap into, just from a networking standpoint. I think I saw one on Instagram. It's called like Millennial Millionaires or something like that. Even real estate. I think real estate is a good area for you to network in and understand, what connections and synergies are there. So you just start with one conversation and let it just build on top of top of itself or compound from there.
Absolutely. So, yeah, at the networking event I went to earlier today, I just discovered there's a nonprofit that specifically helps people improve their credit score for
Uh-huh.
free.
Oh wow. See?
For free, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of credit repair services out there that people charge you a monthly fee or whatnot. And I
Yeah.
was just like, wow,
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was resources like that. So that's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
They have like
Awesome.
I love to read. So I will Google a book or I'll look for book recommendations. Like I'm reading a book right now by a gentleman called Ramit Sethi. Have you heard of him?
I have not.
Um, it's Ramit. He's an Indian gentleman, but the book is called "I Will Teach You to Be Rich." And so
No.
it's nothing groundbreaking, but as you're reading through the book, it is very good, very practical information, teaching you how not to be hit over the head by banks over fees, how to handle overdraft fees, how to use credit to your advantage, things like that. And the funny thing, it's a lot of things I teach my clients in our coaching sessions. But even just starting with reading, we're talking about how do you matriculate from one system to the next? Read a book.
There you
Please read
go.
a book. Man, I like I
Absolutely.
said, I have several reading recommendations. There's a book by Morgan Housel called The Psychology of Money. That's a fantastic book that really addresses the mindset behind why people make certain decisions when it comes to money. And then a third, if you don't mind, I like to make a recommendation. I can't remember the couple's name, but on Instagram, they are at Rich and Regular,
Hmm.
and they focus on kind of that FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. And the name of their book is called Cashing Out. And so they have really good practical steps and advice that you could take. So part of that question too, outside of just networking, is that low hanging fruit. Go buy a book and actually read it.
Absolutely. So it's about exposure to your point. And they say that you're an average of the five closest people you hang around. So to your point, it's
Yeah,
important to be around the right people. If that's your goal, is to go to that next level, hang around people in that next level, right?
that's right. That's right. And
So
not be afraid. I think there's a level of fear in that too, especially if you're not an extrovert. If you're an introverted person, I think it's hard to then open yourself up to that experience, to meeting new people for whatever that end goal is for yourself. But we've got to get past that in some instances to help us propel.
absolutely. So, well, wow, you dropped a lot of gems. I appreciate you for everything that you shared. If you got any value out of it, smash that like button. If you think this will be valuable for other people, share this with other people. And while they're doing that, how can people get a hold of you if they want to get your coaching
Yeah.
services, etc.?
Sure. So I am on Instagram. That is my primary. That's primarily where I hang out. So at LaTika_Tillis. I'm gonna spell that. If it's not, it might be somewhere in the descriptions. I'll have there you go. So y'all see that's my name. So it's just at LaTika_Tillis. That is how you reach me on Instagram. And then my email address, you can always email me. I love getting emails, is info at LaTikaTillis.com, all one word. So that would be the best way to reach out to me. I try to be very responsive on both of those platforms.
Excellent. So, do you have any parting words for the audience? Any last thoughts you'd like to share with everybody?
Yeah, sure. So, since we're talking about money mindset, just know that first, the work starts with you. Assess your situation, figure out what's going on and where you want to go. So if you've not had that conversation with yourself on what that vision, and the thing is you'll have many different visions depending on where you are in your life. So there's flexibility. Life is dynamic, so we're not trying to pigeonhole you into one thing. It's gonna morph and change as life changes, as things change in your life. So just be consistent and don't give up, because sometimes it gets hard. Sometimes it feels like you're making two steps and then you get knocked back three or four steps because life situations come up. I know a lot of people say, I try to save, but then something always happens. Well, just keep saving, keep pushing, keep going forward, keep moving forward, because traction is made by taking one small step after the other. Okay. And read a book.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time and for dropping all those gems of wisdom. And once again, where the rubber meets the road is the application, right?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
applying all those gems you share with us.
Yes,
So I
sir.
appreciate you for being on the show, and hopefully we can have you back on the show in the future.
Most definitely. I look forward to it.
Awesome. Well, once again, if you got any value out of today, definitely go ahead and smash that like button. Share this with your friends and family because, once again, education, they don't teach us in school, they don't teach us in college. And, well, apparently they do. I didn't even know that was a class until tonight. So that's pretty cool. But it's so important because, once again, if you don't know, then how can you do better? So the difference between where you're at and where you want to be is knowledge and the discipline to actually follow through with that knowledge. So once again, this is Finlit Live, and the purpose of this is to educate us on personal finances, everything from real estate to cryptocurrency to credit scores to anything personal finance related. And it's not just me asking questions, but it's an opportunity for you to get your questions answered too. So if you find any value in that, go ahead and go to YouTube, subscribe, push that notification button so that way you know when we go live every Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I appreciate you guys for getting lit.